Now, I invite Professor K. Srinivasulu, Professor retired Department of Sociology and Political Science, Osmania University, and I request Professor Srinivasulu,
Chair of the session, Professor Ramulu, and co-panelists, Dr. Srinivas and Professor Kotireddy, ladies and gentlemen. The present session is on reconstructing Telangana state, policy interventions and developmental prospects. And critical to this theme are three concepts. The concept of reconstruction, concept of development, and policy intervention or policy governance. These are not unambiguous concepts, because no concept in social science is unambiguous. Okay, every concept, every idea is prone to multiple meanings and interpretations. Therefore, I think it's necessary to have clarity, both conceptual and empirical. Is there any problem in my audibility? Am I audible? Okay. So we need to have clarity on these concepts. Okay. So what do we mean by development? Development basically refers to the creation of wealth, and that wealth, okay, would take care of the well-being, prosperity of that state. There is another dimension to the development, which is the distributive dimension. So whenever we talk about development, we necessarily have to talk about what it means to the different sections of the society. Does the process of development empower? But quite often, if you look at the global experience, development is accompanied by marginalization, okay, exclusion, and disempowerment. So therefore, we need to bring in the question of empowerment, the question of distributive justice onto the developmental discourse, debate on developmental issues. So when we talk about development and the question of reconstruction, okay, what are the methodological and conceptual issues that must be clarified? Firstly, that any inquiry into the thematic of development and change must inquire into the nature of political and social power, which involves the question of state. In the larger nation-state context, it's the nation-state. In a context like that of India, the federal context, it's equally important to conceptually and methodologically figure out the regional provincial state, because the state which makes the policies, it takes the decisions, identifies the priorities for the course of development. Therefore, state is an important conceptual analytical nations on the question of development. Second, if not equal but very important thing is, what is the nature of social power? Because along with the state, there are dominant social and economic interests which try to influence the course of development. Therefore, we need to pay attention to what is the nature of the permeation of political power. What somebody like Foucault would call capillary, molecular forms of power distribution, because they are very crucial, critical factors in determining the nature of development and the results, outcomes, okay, impact of development. So therefore, methodologically, we need to okay, see development not aspectually, but in its totality, by taking both the state and non-state actors in this. Since the question of policy, okay, and development involves theoretical, conceptual, and also empirical analysis. So three important components of any serious social science analysis. So we need to deal with these important things. Okay, and if you look at the field of developmental studies and policy sciences, the dominant framework, okay, has been the liberal behavioralist framework. Development seen in terms of okay, certain indices, GDP, per capita distribution. Okay, these are the macro indices which help us in measuring the quantitative dimensions of development. And development, study of development is not just a privilege of the discipline of economics, because if you look at the post-war growth of evolution of developmental studies, there is a intersectionality between the three important disciplines in social sciences. Since there are a lot of young scholars, it's very amazing that there are a lot of young people around, because in most of the universities you don't see young people participating in the seminars. Mostly we see 60 plus. Of course, universities in Delhi like JNU, Delhi University, or Calcutta, Jadavpur seem to be exceptions. But otherwise, everywhere we see the paucity of, deficit of younger people. Since a lot of younger people are there, so I thought I should also briefly deal with some of these theoretical assumptions. The dominant framework, okay, in the field of development and policy science has been this liberal behavioralist, which has risen to prominence in the post-war period. But simultaneously, we also see the enlargement of the scope of developmental studies by involving the intersectionality of these three important social science disciplines, economics, sociology, and political science. Because development is a multidimensional, okay, process. But what behavioralism has done, which continues to, very unfortunately, despite the tremendous intellectual critique, continues to be the dominant paradigm in the policy studies. Therefore, I thought it's necessary to spend some time on this. The behavioral studies, okay, behavioral paradigm has reduced the complexity of some of the important thinkers, like for instance the classical political economists like Adam Smith, okay, who to begin with was basically a moral philosopher. Later he shifts to the study of political economy of the emergent modern society, that is capitalism. But otherwise, I mean, the entire behavioral economics has reduced Adam Smith to the theoretician of self-interest and market. But if you look at his conceptualization of human nature, it's very complex. He brings in the question of compassion, harmony, okay, cooperation. All these are part of course, along with self-interest. But the mainstream economics of the neoclassical variety has reduced the entire classical political economy to pin down it to the question of self-interest. Similar has been the fate of the great sociologists. In fact, when I entered this college, I have seen, the department, I have seen the photographs of all the great sociologists from both Western and Indian tradition. And you see one of the prominent founders of the modern sociology, Max Weber. Max Weber is a very complex sociological thinker because he's not a sociologist of ordinary variety. He's a very important historical sociologist because his range encompasses from ancient times to the contemporary and all the religions, study of great religions of humanity. And is a tremendous critic of modernity, his idea of and critique of his idea of enchantment and disenchantment in the modern world, his idea of and critique of instrumental rationality governing the bureaucratic and executive administrative order in modern society. In a sense, one can very easily say without any exaggeration that Max Weber is in fact Franz Kafka of sociology. These are the dilemmas that we see in the writings of Franz Kafka, okay, could also be seen being reflected in a complex thinker. But behavioralism has reduced Weber into a system-centric or structural functionalist kind of thinker. So we need to, if we are interested in pursuing the policy studies developmental seriously, especially the sociologists and political scientists, should focus on this multidimensionality of the policy developmental processes, which is very relevant to the question of reconstruction of the new state of Telangana. So therefore, one of the important questions that any consideration of the development and policy must reflect on the nature of consent, nature of legitimacy that is built into the system, political hegemony, the social hegemony of the dominant classes, okay, expressed in a condensed way by the state and political regime. But it's equally important to pay attention to the responses from below, okay, how the popular classes are responding to the policy priorities and developmental paradigms of the dominant classes. Okay, it may not necessarily be expressed in the form of class. There could be a complex sociometry, a social matrix of identities that come into play in the expression of the aspirations, desires, demands of the popular classes. So therefore we need to have, okay, this kind of holistic approach towards the assessment, the nature, the character of policies, and also their impact. So with these preliminary introductory remarks, let me go into the main presentation. I would make my presentation in three parts. Firstly, I'll talk about the theoretical frame or framework for the critical questions that the developmental policy study involves. Secondly, since we are interested in inquiring into the nature of Telangana society, economy, and polity and culture in the post-state formation from 2014 onwards, we need to have some broad meta idea, okay, of Telangana. And you are all familiar with the fact that there was an intense debate with the Telangana movement on the question of the future of Telangana. What kind of Telangana are we desiring? Are we aspiring to be living, to be the future of, so there was this controversy, this was intense contestation between the Bhaugolika Telangana, territorial, spatial notion of Telangana, and the conception of Telangana, okay, with people and social justice as the central idea, okay. So we need to, if you want to assess the last 10 years of so-called development, we need to have some broad perspective to examine, see the fault lines, the limitations of what has happened in the last 10 years in the name of development. Okay? So in other words, social sciences, unlike the behavioral framework, is not a neutral, okay, objective in that sense. It's a judgmental discipline. Okay, social science involves social criticism and judgment. If you take that kind of hermeneutic position on the question of knowledge, then obviously your way of looking at the things would be different. So that's the second important. Thirdly, what has been the diagnosis of the nature of development and the analysis of its inadequacies, limitations, positive dimensions, etc. Upon which depends on what kind of project of reconstruction we are going to configure, we are going to imagine, okay, we would expect to guide our future. Now that there is a regime change in the last assembly election, so this question assumes significance. If you were to have the same party in power, perhaps the question won't have been that important and relevant. So first the question of the theoretical premises. If you look at the trajectory of the modern state in this context, in the context of India, we should have, in the context of India, a federal context, we need to have a disaggregate notion of state. Okay, we cannot just analytically take the nation state, national state, or the central state, and the regimes in power at the center to be the central focus of our critique. We need to take the regional state, provincial state also into consideration. So I would theoretically suggest that we need to have a disaggregate notion of state, and related to it is a disaggregate notion of political power and social power. Okay, and what has been the chief objective of the modern state? Basically to enhance, create the conditions for the accumulation of capital, which in popular parlance, creation of wealth. Okay, a state, a country, or a nation is considered to be developed only when it has that surplus wealth. Okay, but then it's also necessary to factor in that is the process of pursuance of accumulation of capital an unhindered, incontrovertible process? And theories of the state, okay, many modern, not merely Marxist theoreticians, even the non-Marxist, Weberian kind of, if you like, political and social theorists would say, would note, there could be both theoretically and practically be many constraints, obstacles to this pursuance of capital accumulation. They would come from those sections of the society which are disadvantaged, maybe really or could be perceptually, even if one is not determined to feel. I mean, there are many movements today that are happening, okay, which are not in reality disadvantaged. Let's say, for instance, the Marathas demanding reservation, or Kapus in Andhra Pradesh demanding reservations. In what sense do they deserve? This is a critical question. But perceptually they feel and try to organize themselves and articulate these demands. So therefore, the state theorists would see this process to be a contradictory process, a process that involves conflict between accumulation of capital on the one hand and obstructions, limitations, constraints to this. Therefore, state should not merely prioritize the accumulation of capital, creation of wealth, with the hope that this wealth so created, I mean, there is this very dominant theory that once wealth is created, that would percolate down. Okay? But actually experience, both historical and contemporary, especially in the context of neoliberal globalization, clearly shows that wealth that doesn't percolate, it remains there itself. That's why less than 1% of the people in the world control 60-70% of the wealth. That means wealth has more evaporative nature rather than percolating down. Okay, what is in neoliberal theory, both economic and social theory, called trickle down. There is no actual trickle down. There is necessary, therefore, to have deliberate state policy, political public policy, to see. This shows the state of higher education in Telangana. That's on the later side. So the point is that the process of accumulation of capital must be matched with the welfarist intervention of the state. So therefore the two dimensions show the question of development. One is creation of the wealth, other one is a deliberate policy intervention to see to it that the basic minimal needs of the society, different sections of the society are taken care of. So there is this tremendous pressure, okay, because if you do not take care of the minimum social good, then what would happen? It would impair the process of consent creation. The classes which are disenchanted with, disillusioned, discontented with this dominant power structure would, okay, protest against it. So it raises serious questions of legitimacy. And advanced capitalism, if you look at Northern European capitalism, unlike American capitalism, they have learned this lesson, okay, and the entire post-war, okay, state action has been, okay, densely and meaningfully informed by this social welfare dimension, because consent, social consent and political legitimacy is very important to the modern politics and society. But once again, coming back to the dominant paradigm, the behavioral neoclassical paradigm in the policy studies and development studies, they have broadly, okay, ignored this important dimension. So the whole economic operation is reduced to demand and supply and utility, the neoclassical kind of position. So therefore we need to move away from that, okay, and look at the question of development. So with this broad theoretical kind of perspective, we need to examine the case of Telangana. I mean, this is the job of universities to bring in that broad macro, okay, theoretical perspective, not just seep into cross empiricism. Okay. So now the question is, how do you look at the Telangana predicament? The reconstruction. There are two important ideas. Is the problem of Telangana one of backwardness? I mean, there was intense debate during Telangana movement. Or is it the case of uneven development? So conceptually there is a difference between backward. Backwardness is the earlier or original state in the trajectory of backward to development. Okay. So in the modernist trajectory, okay, backwardness is the initial condition, like the original sin. But is the case of Telangana that? Or is it a case of induced, okay, underdevelopment? In which case the matrix would be between development and underdevelopment, the corollary of development. If certain sectors, certain areas, spatial entities develop, they must be developing at the cost of some other entities. So therefore there is a cause and effect relation between development and underdevelopment. So therefore, is it a question of development or backwardness? That's the question which we need to. And some of us, in fact, I myself wrote a paper for the Nehru Museum and Memorial Library, which conducted a seminar, 3-day seminar in Delhi, and which is subsequently published in collaboration with SAYS, where we try to say that the case of Telangana is not just of underdevelopment, it's a question of internal colony. There is a colonization of land, water, and resources in Telangana. I mean, the Andhra settlements that we see here, and siphoning of the surplus, both budgetary and plan and non-plan, budgetary and non-budgetary, okay, allotments being diverted almost unilaterally, okay, to the development of coastal Andhra. So this is the kind of argument which came for intense debate during the Telangana movement. I am stating all this because this has a bearing on the present question of development in Telangana. In fact, look at very interestingly, I mean, most of your youngsters you may not be familiar with. In fact, some of the sophisticated scholars from Andhra, one Professor G. Parthasarathi, the highly respected agrarian economist of India, not just Andhra Pradesh, was a professor of economics in Baltimore University, and agriculture economist of the quantitative kind, highly respected. He came out with an interesting kind of analysis. He said instead of taking regions, okay, as the basis for understanding the socio-economic imbalances or uneven development, he thought that it's better to take district as the unit. And he collected huge data from census, economic surveys, okay, so on and so forth, from the income, productivity, per capita, so on and so forth, and came to the suggested conclusion that certain districts in northern coastal Andhra, like Srikakulam, Parvatipuram, rural Visakhapatnam and Vijayanagaram, are much more backward compared to certain districts in Telangana, like Nizamabad, Karimnagar, Warangal and Khammam. And we thought this is very clever, intelligent way of manipulating it. In fact, some of us wrote articles in EPW, Economic and Political Weekly, where we argued why the category of region more important and relevant to understand the nature of development and uneven development or underdevelopment rather than district. Because the category of region, Madam, United Andhra Pradesh consists of 3 regions, coastal Andhra, Rayalaseema and Telangana. Region is invested with dense historicity. We are not just talking about regions in very neutral, okay, special category. When we talk about Telangana, we talk with a lot of dense kind of historical investment. Okay, so region refers to the historical legacy, historical past. It refers to the differences in terms of political culture and political economy of development. Therefore, region is the more rational, legitimate category for comparison rather than district. Look at the mischief. When you take the district, obviously there are many districts in coastal Andhra which are more backward. So, in fact, the very fact that there has been intermittently a demand for Kalinga Andhra, which consists of these 4 or 5 districts, itself shows that they were trying to compare their region with its unique history, with its unique cultural, political background, with the rest of developed Andhra, coastal Andhra. Okay? That means the people of the Kalinga Andhra, okay, have realized the political import of the category of region, okay, region-based identity to that of districts. So therefore, there was this kind of very highly sophisticated, factually dense kind of comparison based on district rather than region. So therefore, we must be aware of this background to understand, okay, the economic, social and political process in the post-state formation. We know that Telangana state formed in 2014, now entering the second decade of its existence. So 10 years is a fairly reasonable period to make a critical assessment of where we started, where we are, therefore where we should go. Okay, it's an opportune moment. In that sense, I must congratulate the Department of Sociology to have this very valuable seminar on reconstructing Telangana state. I hope other departments will follow the suit, because it has to be a continuous dialogue. Okay? And unfortunately, universities are not coming up to, not only here, in large parts of the country. I mean, the situation in the northern Hindi belt, UP, Bihar, Rajasthan, very, very pathetic. So we must, because once you create research-based, okay, output, that would be disseminated by the mass media, print and electronic media. Dr. Srinivasulu is here. I mean, they would easily see the merit of it and then disseminate this information, very critical kind of information. Therefore, we have a very pivotal kind of role. Almost lore of what Socrates faced with the trial for corrupting the Athenian youth, said that I am a gadfly. So I am in fact useful to you, and you don't realize that and try to murder me. So universities must play the role of that gadfly, Socratic gadfly, okay, and show the mirror to the powers that be. So this seminar, I hope, would do that. So now, what is the basis of the evaluation of this 10 years developmental trajectory and policy interventions? And as I referred, there was an intense debate between this social Telangana, Samajika Telangana, and Bhaugolika Telangana. And the central issue in the Telangana movement was about Nillu, Nidulu, Niyamakalu, okay, attending to the neglect on the irrigation agriculture front, okay, taking care of and seeing to it that there is proper distribution of resources, proper allocation of resources to the priority areas. Thirdly, since there is a huge unemployment problem, now today it's magnified many more times, both locally, provincially, and also nationally. Therefore, the question of employment. So, Telangana movement articulated these three issues as central concerns of the movement. Second important thing that we need to, when we are assessing the question of development, we need to keep in mind that the strength of the Telangana movement was the phenomenal and spirited, energetic participation of the civil society, non-political, non-state actors in the movement. Today, you know what is the state of the civil society in Telangana. And these civil society organizations, to give them the due credit. In fact, if you look at the official attempts to write the history of Telangana, it's somewhere in an inconspicuous position. I mean, if you look at the Telugu Academy books, perhaps some of you must have seen, the whole thing is sought to be projected as the creation of a party, which came to power subsequently. I mean, this has been historically the fate of most of the popular movements. If you look at the Indian nationalist movement also, what Nehru regime has done is, through official discourse, okay, lessen the importance of the popular grassroots, subaltern participation in the movement. So that has been the dominant official attitude towards the popular movement. So what happened in Telangana is no exception to this. So on the one hand, the question of these three demands, Nelu, Nidulu, Niyamakalu. Secondly, the active participation of the civil society are the two critical issues that we need to keep in mind, okay, when we assess the post-Telangana developments. Okay. So I thought it's instructive to identify four cardinal, okay, indices to measure to assess the post-Telangana course of development, both political, economic and social. Firstly, the issue is the promise of the moment. Okay, the question of regional identity, regional specificity was central to. Today, if you look at the politics of this country, the kind of euphoria of one nation, everything one. Okay, there is a tendency to underplay these regional formations, regional specificities. Okay, can we imagine a country of this complexity in a Unitarian manner? Because this country is an integration of so many diversities, historical, political, economic, cultural, okay, diversity in terms of language, culture, habits, food. How can you put them in the single whole? Okay, that what would be just imagine the consequences of that kind of understanding and following political policy actions. So the merit of the Telangana movement that it brought the question of regional identity, regional self-respect onto the national and even international, okay, political social discourse. Second is the nature of the policy regime. Is the regime, can the regime be characterized as a developmentalist? Or should we, because of the self-projection of the regime, be considered as populist? So development versus populism is the second important cardinal aspect of such a prospective assessment. Thirdly, what has been the nature of governance? Policy development cannot be separated from the question of governance. Has the governance been democratic in any sense? Or was it populist, authoritarian, personalistic kind of governance? Because if you look at most of the political regimes, okay, headed by regional parties, they tend to be internally authoritarian. This total concentration of political power, social power in the hand of the supreme of the party. Win the election or lose the election, the person will. Just imagine how many decades Karnanidhi, victory or failure, continued as the leader of the DMK party. So it's not something unique to any political formation or any particular state, but it's been the generic characteristic of the regional political formations. So therefore we need to, because after all the style of governance, the mode of governance, the nuances of governance determine the nature and quality of development, okay, and the percolation, trickle down of the impact of that development, consequences, fruits, outcomes of that development. Third important thing is, what has been the state of civil society in the Telangana, okay? Civil society meaning the possibility of that public sphere where democratic expression of dissent, criticism of the government. In fact, it's good for the governments if there is a lot of criticism so that they can have attempts, they can initiate attempts at the self-correction. But unfortunately, none of the rulers, okay, would follow that, are cautious enough to. And only when they lose power, perhaps they become introspective. But that too, we cannot guarantee. We presume that wisdom will dawn on them to go for introspection. So these four issues, I think, need to be examined in order to assess the last 10 years of Telangana's journey on the path of political change, social development, and economic prosperity. Telangana, as we know, is essentially agrarian, economy and society, are largely dependent on rainfall. Rain-fed agriculture is the hallmark of it. And it also has a long history of irrigation, okay, from Kakatiya times onwards. And there was administrative setup to take care of that, the traditional village officers, Patwari Patel. But what happened once TDP came to power in 1980s, they abolished these village officers and thereby caused violence on the structures, however faulty, however reflective of the dominant structures of caste and economic power, they were playing certain social role. I mean, every phenomenon has two sides, positive, negative, progressive and regressive. So, but the regressive side of the village office system was highlighted and no substitute was placed, okay, after its abolition. Therefore, you see the neglect of the common property resources, including the village tank system. Second important thing that has happened as a result of is the total depletion. Just imagine during the Nizam's period, 20% of the total land in a village was supposed to be common property. Puramboku, Bancharai and common grazing land. But by the time N.T. Rao concluded his first term, because all these common lands were given out for poor housing. Okay, you go travel from here to Warangal, you see on the either side of the road is houses for the poor people constructed, and nobody lives there because it's on the outskirts of the. So if there is house near their workplace, they would make use of it. So village tanks were converted into these outsides, house sites. Okay. So one very positive contribution of the TRS government of coming to power in 2014 is an attempt to, through what's called Mission Kakatiya, an attempt to revive the village tank system. Okay, that's one very important. Mission Kakatiya and Mission Bhagirath. I mean, you're all familiar with this, so I will not go into those details. And along with that, you have what is called Raitu Bandhu. But if you look at the agrarian scenario in the last couple of decades, say from 1990s onwards, not just in Telangana, Andhra Pradesh, the entire South India, okay, the agrarian scenario has changed phenomenally. There is a perceptible decline of owner cultivators involved directly in cultivation. There is a huge colossal growth of tenant farming. Okay, because the well-settled land-owning rich peasantry has moved out of agriculture into non-farm sector. Okay, I mean, you see so-called Swagruha houses in Hyderabad, not only Hyderabad, almost in every town in both the states. Okay, who are these people? These are all this prosperous dominant peasantry shifting away from agriculture to the non-farm sector. Okay, leasing out their lands. They are not selling their lands back in the village. They lease out their land in the village. So therefore, when we are talking about support to agriculture, support to the farmer class, we must consider this significant shift. Okay, so the Raitu Bandhu doesn't address the question of tenancy. I mean, if Chief Minister very brusquely in a press conference said, where is the data to do that? I mean, if the government wills, it can collect. In fact, it's the responsibility of, I mean, we have elected you to collect the data and give it, take policy, proper policy decision on the basis of appropriate, reliable, authentic data. You cannot abdicate your responsibility because there is no data, because you have no will to collect the data. So therefore, this is important because one of the factors which contributed, to what extent quantitatively we do not know, but it's a significant factor which has led to the electoral defeat of TRS. Because the tenant farmers are negatively disposed to the regime. Okay? And it is said by some very public spirited people that more than 600 crores under this scheme approved to the people who are not in India, so-called non-resident Indians. I mean, how far it is true, we do not know, but it's come from a very responsible ex-IAS officer, therefore we need to take seriously. Okay? Whether true or not is a matter of investigation. So the point is that though very laudable kind of priority to agriculture was seen during the 10-year period, but there are internal limitations and inadequacies. Okay? And there is no possibility, there was no possibility of internal scrutiny and criticism in the earlier regime. Second important section which was very active in the civil society, okay, mobilization for the movement was the middle class, the youth, the unemployed youth, the students. They have suffered tremendous, at least they feel that they have suffered tremendous negligence, okay, during the last 10 years. Therefore constitute a very significant vocal disgruntled section of the Telangana society. And you also have a very well elaborated kind of populist schemes, 1 rupee kg, 2 different asara schemes, midday meal, and I will not go into that. It's a very elaborate kind of welfare populist schemes that we see. What have been the other side of this? It's a responsibility of university to see the darker side of this. For instance, take the case of Shadi Mubarak and Kalyana Lakshmi. It's quite possible logically to suggest that in the last couple of decades, in the post-emergency period and much more significantly in the last couple of decades, we see a lot of conspicuous rising of aspirations among the subaltern castes and communities with a very significant gender sensitivity. So a lot of subaltern girls aspire to go for higher education. And through Shadi Mubarak and Kalyan Lakshmi, the government tries to incentivize early marriage of these girls. And families, most of these poor families, would give preference to marriage rather than education. So what has been the outcome of this? What has been the social impact of it? I mean, I feel very sorry that, we have a very fairly vibrant, vocal, feminist women's movement in Telangana. It is urban women's movement. But none of them seem to have, lacking in adequate information, but to my mind, nobody seems to have looked at the other side of it. So in what way has it trampled the emerging, aspiring women from the subaltern communities? And all these schemes, what is unique about this regime is, are totally personalized. It will not be an exaggeration to characterize this regime as a highly paternalistic, personalized, populist regime, headed by KCR, and which undermines the internal democracy within the party. There is hardly any democracy. So everything emanates from one center. So it raises an important question to the pattern of governance. Can a party, can a regime which is not internally democratic be an instrument of democracy in the larger society? Have you ever asked this question? As critical social science students, you must ask. You are not democratic internally, of course externally as well, but you think that you are an instrument of democracy by participating in the election. So what is the authenticity of, that is a question which we need to ask. So another important thing is that through what YSR regime popularly called Akash, attracting the leaders from opposition parties by coaxing and cajoling them, because after all, every politician in today's India has some business commercial interest, and they need the support, direct, indirect, tacit, implicit support from the party in power. So therefore, you see the mass exodus of people from the opposition to the ruling party. We have seen that in a phenomenal way from 2014 onwards. Now you see the reverse traffic. Going by the reports, newspaper reports, we know that a lot of people are interested in jumping into the Congress. Perhaps in their wisdom, Congress is saying, slow down, please slow down. Don't be in such a hurry. We'll accommodate you. You are welcome. We'll accommodate you. So what does it mean to the larger question of democracy, democratic culture is a question we need to. After all, we have to debate it. If universities don't debate, who will debate? Who has the time and patience and resources to debate? So all these things come onto the agenda. And generally, when a new state is formed, or when a new country, nation state is formed, there is a celebratory mood. People shift because of that euphoria, activists, intellectuals, all kinds of, that we have seen during Nehru's period also. So the ruling regime co-opts even the dissenting voices, intellectuals, co-opts them through accommodation, through coaxing and cajolling. And this has happened, as a result of which, see, Telugu Desam almost is non-existent in Telangana, which was an interestingly important force if you look at the 2014 election. Similar fate met the Congress also. So deceleration of political society, weakening of democracy at the national and local, provincial level. Secondly, weakening of civil society have been the hallmarks of the last 10 years of added to that, okay, most deadly kind of poisonous combination with personalistic policy decision making and governance. This has been, okay, and naturally, if you look at the 2023 elections, electoral campaign discourse, some of these issues have come to the forefront. One of the most important things that has come to the forefront is the charge of corruption, Kaleshwaram and all that, all you are familiar with. I mean, that tends to stick to the regime because it's highly personalized regime. If the regime were known for its democratic, decentralized kind of governance, okay, then it would have been difficult to make that charge. So the inherent danger, okay, in a centralized, personalized regime is this. Any allegation would very easily stick to. So that's what happened. The charge of corruption and neglect of very important two sectors, because the underdevelopment of Telangana, okay, has a very strong social dimension. Whenever we talk about development, we are talking about, in the last couple of years, developmental discourse has always been talking about inclusive development, balanced development, equitable distribution. These are the concerns that have figured very prominently in the development discourse, unlike 1960s, 70s, in the immediate post-war period. So now these questions are important, these questions are raised, and we know that in the last 10 years, the public education almost got demolished. Both the school education and university. I mean, the state in which you are, the Osmania University is, when it's supposed to have 1280 faculty members. Today, 200? How many permanent faculty? And in fact, the principal, Professor Ganesh, was telling us that as the principal is heading 5 departments. That 5 departments in our college do not have permanent faculty, not even lecturer. So he is the head. So he is be all and end all of Arts College. So I think tomorrow when he retires, Arts College will be orphaned. Anyway, that is on the later side. So both the question of backwardness or underdevelopment of Telangana is not just economic, not just on the counts of irrigation and agriculture, but also very importantly on the count of social sector, education, health. These have suffered phenomenally. And therefore, the social anger, especially among the youth, the students. And all this is not done innocently. not an innocent negligence. I think it's a very concerted, very designed. Because look at the kind of boost that the private sector, both in school and university education. I mean, most of these private universities are in fact joke on the idea of university. University is an integrated space. Okay, if you talk about Osmania University, almost every discipline of knowledge and science will be there. But all these are engineering colleges converted into universities. And in addition to honor or appear to compensate the idea of university, they will start some dental department, management, which are market savvy. Okay, so the impoverishment of the idea of university is critical too. And Osmania is the soul of Telangana. Remove the Osmania, what will happen to the spiritual life of Telangana? Okay, historically its contribution to the intellectual, cultural growth of the region is phenomenal. So now all these institutions are in a very pathetic kind of situation. I think we need to see the 2023 elections in the light of this kind of political economy of development and underdevelopment, and political sociology of ill-conceived legitimization process. Then we will be able to understand 2023. And the point is that the new regime, which displays a lot of enthusiasm, promising every day that we will inquire into everything that was done by the earlier regime, okay, would learn lessons from the TRS electoral debacle, okay, and social political capital that the TRS could get from the Telangana movement. Okay, it will learn the lessons and pay a comprehensive, holistic attention to the question of reconstruction of Telangana. Reconstruction of Telangana is not a joke, it's a very serious political, social, cultural question. And by organizing seminar, Professor Ganesh and his team has put a very big challenge before the regime. Hopefully, the regime, provided the regime takes it seriously. If the regime takes universities seriously, I hope they would do it, because yesterday the minister was here. So, I hope similar kind of exercises are done elsewhere, and they would, in fact, give energy to the different sections of the society, the civil society, political society, including the political regime. Thank you very much for this opportunity. I'm sorry if I have crossed my time limit, which I think I seem to have. Okay.